Okay, in the second video we are going to look at the use of variables. Now what we're going to do is going to create a program which will assign two numbers to variables, and then we're going to basically add, subtract, divide and multiply, and we're going to take that then a little step further. So I'm just going to get my code windows back up. So I've got my shell ready to run and I got my code window here. So what we're going to do is going to create two variables. Now I'm very particular when it comes to variable names, because if you're writing in a lot of code, you may need to look back at your program, and if you've got weird names, you're never going to remember it. So if we do num1 equals 8 and then num2 equals 10 as an example, we know that obviously the variable num1 refers to number 1 and num2 will refer to number 2. Now in the last video we looked at basically adding two numbers together, or dividing two or multiplying two. This time we're going to do the same, it's just we're going to use the variable names. So we're going to use num1 and num2. So if I do print num1 plus num2, you'll probably think, well, hang on, is that just going to add up the number 1 and number 2? Well, it is, because to Python, number 1 isn't actually number 1. Number 1 is 8. And number 2 is 10. So when we run this program, it's going to give me the answer 18. Let me just move the shell over a little bit. So you can see there it's calculated the number 18. And we can do a number of things with this. If I do print num1 minus num2, or print num1 multiply num2, and then we run this program, you can see now we're basically, instead of putting the numbers in all the time, we are dynamically using the variable names to perform calculations. Now the big advantage of this is, if we've got a really large program and we're referring to a variable all the time, so for example num1, we can change this in one area of the code and then it updates everywhere else. So let's say for example 8 changes from 8 to say 50. All I've done is I've changed this one instance of it here, and next time I run, obviously all of the numbers will update, because num1 now is known as 50 instead of what it was previously known as. Now as I said earlier, Python is a linear program, so it works one step at a time. So let's say for example we have num1 here is 50. If I do this, num1 equals 5, as an example, watch what happens. So if I do run modulo, you can see something strange has happened. And the reason is this. Python will go through this program step by step and line by line. So the first step of it is to assign 50 to the variable num1. The second is to assign the number 10 to num2. But then, the third step, it overwrites whatever's in num1. So now num1 is 5, so it forgets it. Now to prove this, if I do a print num1, and then I do a print num1 here, wrong bracket, if I just remove these for a second, if I run this code, watch what's going to happen now. It's going to say 50 then 5, because initially it was set here as 50 and now down here it is set as obviously 5 again. Now we can take this a little step further. So we've done some basic operators and we've added in a few things. So this time, instead of using and declaring a variable, we're going to ask the user for an input. Now we can do this in a number of ways. We can say num1 equals input, and then I'm going to open my brackets and give me a number. So the first line is going to be an input, which is going to say give me a number, and whenever I give it, it's going to store it as num1. So we're going to do num2 here equals input, open brackets, give me a number. So what we're then going to do is, I'm just going to do a basic add, print num1 plus num2. and obviously you can change this. So if you didn't want a plus, you could do a minus or a subtract or whatever. So if I run this code, so run module, it's going to say give me a number. So let's give it a number 6. Give me another number there. So I'm going to do 7, and watch what happens. It says 67, and the reason for that is this input now is treated as what we call a string. So it's a piece of text. And let me just show you. If I run this program again, so I put Jim as an example, give me a number Jim Jones. You can see now it's just put Jim and Jones together, because it's not recognizing these as numbers, even though to us as humans we recognize that as num, because the variable's num. It's not actually coming in as a variable, as a number rather. It's coming in as a piece of text. So in order to force this to be a piece of to be a number instead of a piece of text, we use a term called int, I-N-T, and that stands for integer, and an integer is a whole number. So if I do this, int, and then notice I'm putting another bracket here, so when you do your code you will need to put another bracket. So if we look at this code now, when I go run module, give me a number, we'll do 6 and 7, and the answer comes up there, 13. Now the reason it's done that is because whatever I've given here, so this line of the code is asking for an input, and then it gets turned into an integer, gets turned into a number, and then it's stored as the variable num1. Now if I run this program again, but this time I do this 5.2, watch what happens. It gives me an error, and what it's basically saying is invalid literal for int. In other words, it's basically saying it doesn't understand what 5.2 is. It only understands what whole numbers are. Now if ever you're going to write a program and you need to use decimals, instead of using int you can use float. So if I just change this to float, and now run this again, so I'm going to do 5.2, and then we're going to do 6.3. It's now given me an answer, and the answer is also a float as well. So the answer is 11.5. Now again, if I run this and try to give it a letter, it's not going to work. So if I put Jim in as an example, it's basically going to say, yep, there's an error, it doesn't understand what Jim is, because obviously it's a float. It's looking for a float, so it's looking for some type of number. And if I do give it a whole number, it'll also work. So if I just run this model again and do 6, 7, it's then giving me an answer of 13, right? 0.0, because obviously it's accepting this as 6.0 and that as 7.0. Now we can add a little bit more to this to make this a little bit more user friendly. And what we could do is we could store num1 and num2 as a variable, so we could call it answer or total, and we could then print out a nice message for the user. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to add in another variable called total, and then I'm going to do num1 plus num2, and what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take this out and I'm going to add in speech marks and saying your answer is. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a comma and we're going to put total. Now you'll notice this looks a little bit weird because I've now got a piece of text in here and I've got a black item here which is obviously a variable, and this comma is basically going to add them together for me. So in other words, when I run this program now, give me a number 6, give me another number 7, and you can see now it says your answer is 13, which is great. That's exactly what I want. So that's how you would add then your answer to obviously come up as a bit more friendly, or a bit more of a friendly message here. Now in the next video, what we're going to look at doing is we're going to be looking at having more text in terms of inputs, and we're going to be doing a little bit more with numbers. We're going to look at ages and so forth.